The stars burned above Velenthor Prime, but they were not stars anymore. They were ships, thousands upon thousands of them, hanging in the black void like drops of poison waiting to fall. Ambassador Thelvan stood at the observation window of Orbital Station 7 and watched the end of everything he had ever known. His pale blue skin had grown even paler in the last 3 days. His 4 eyes, once bright with the confidence of a senior diplomat, now held only exhaustion and fear. Behind him, the command center buzzed with desperate activity. Officers shouted orders. Technicians scrambled at their stations. But Thelvan knew it was all meaningless. The numbers did not lie, and the numbers said they were all going to die. The Kethari had come. For 10,000 years, the consortium of 12 had ruled this part of the galaxy. 12 species, united in purpose, had built an empire of trade and knowledge and peace. They had believed themselves unbeatable. They had believed their treaties would hold forever. They had believed wrong. The Kethari Dominion had broken every agreement 3 months ago. They had started with the outer colonies, small worlds, unimportant worlds. The consortium had sent strongly worded messages. The Kethari had sent armies. By the time the consortium understood what was happening, 9 worlds had already fallen, not conquered, fallen. The Kethari did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They consumed. Thelvan had seen the footage from Kelrath Station. He still saw it when he closed his eyes. The insectoid warriors pouring through the corridors. The screaming. The way they took the bodies afterward, dragging them back to their ships for purposes no one wanted to think about. The Kethari were not just conquerors. They were a swarm. And swarms did not stop until there was nothing left to eat. Ambassador. A voice cut through his dark thoughts. He turned to see Fleet Commander Soralan approaching. She was Aloy like him. But where Thelvan was a diplomat trained in words and compromise, Soralan was a warrior. Her uniform was crisp. Her posture was straight. But her eyes told the same story his did. They had already lost. They just had not admitted it yet. Commander, Thelvan said, what is the latest count? 3,217 ships in our combined fleet. The High Council has ordered every vessel in this sector to Velenthor. This is the final stand. And the Kethari? Soralan paused. The pause told Thelvan everything. But she spoke anyway. Our long-range sensors have confirmed 15,000 vessels, possibly more. The swarm fleets are difficult to count accurately. They move, strangely. 15,000. Thelvan turned back to the window. Below them, Velenthor Prime turned slowly in the darkness. 12 billion souls lived on that world. Refugees from the fallen colonies had swelled the population even further. Children played in the streets of the capital city right now, unaware that death was coming for them. Parents tucked their young ones into bed, promising that everything would be all right. They were all lying. How long? Thelvan asked. The swarm fleets will arrive in approximately 16 hours. Perhaps less. They seem to be accelerating. Of course they are. They smell blood. Thelvan's voice was bitter. 10,000 years of civilization. 10,000 years of building and growing and dreaming. And it ends like this. Eaten by insects. The fleet will fight, Ambassador. We will not go quietly. I know you will, Commander. I know. Thelvan placed a thin hand against the cold glass of the window. But 3,000 ships against 15,000. The mathematics are cruel. Soralan said nothing. There was nothing to say. They both knew the truth. The consortium fleet would fight bravely. They would destroy perhaps 1,000 enemy vessels, maybe 2,000 if fortune smiled upon them. And then, they would die, and Velenthor would die, and the Kethari would move on to the next world. The door to the command center slid open, and a young officer rushed in. His skin was flushed with excitement or terror. Thelvan could not tell which. Perhaps both. Ambassador, Commander, an emergency transmission from the High Council. Soralan's eyes narrowed. Put it through. The main display screen flickered to life. 12 faces appeared, each representing one of the species that made up the consortium. There was High Chancellor Morven of the Telori, his ancient features heavy with grief. Beside him sat Admiral Cross of the Veth, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under harsh lights. The others filled the screen in a mosaic of different forms, different colors, different evolutionary paths, but they all shared the same expression: desperation. Ambassador Thelvan, High Chancellor Morven spoke. His voice was tired. We have received your reports. We have analyzed the situation. The mathematics, as you say, are cruel. I understand, High Chancellor. The fleet will do its duty. We have no doubt of that. Morven glanced at his fellow council members. Something passed between them. A silent agreement. But we have not called you to discuss the battle. We have called you to discuss an alternative. Thelvan felt something stir in his chest. Hope? Fear? He was not sure. What alternative, High Chancellor? Our allies are committed. Our resources are deployed. What option remains? Morven was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. There is one species we have not contacted. One species we swore, 200 years ago, that we would never contact again. The command center grew very quiet. Thelvan saw Sorellan's 4 eyes widen. He saw the young officer take a step backward, as if distance could protect him from the words he was hearing. You cannot mean, Thelvan began. Humanity, said Admiral Cross. His mechanical voice carried no emotion, but his optical sensors dimmed slightly. Even the Veth, who felt nothing, seemed uncomfortable. We are speaking of the humans. Thelvan's mouth went dry. Humanity. The word was forbidden in polite company. Parents used it to frighten misbehaving children. Soldiers whispered it around campfires when they wanted to scare each other. In official records, humanity was listed as a minor species, quarantined on the edge of known space, of no consequence or interest. But everyone knew the truth. Everyone remembered. The quarantine exists for a reason, Thelvan said carefully. The humans are dangerous, unstable. The records from the contact war. The records are sealed, Morven interrupted. And they will remain sealed. But yes, Ambassador, we know what the humans are capable of. We know why we locked them away. We know what we risk by reaching out to them. Then why? Because we are going to die anyway. Morven's composure cracked. For a moment, the ancient leader looked like what he truly was, a frightened old man watching his civilization crumble. He took a breath and steadied himself. The Kethari will not stop at Valenthor. They will not stop until every world in the consortium burns. We have no choice, Ambassador. We must ask the monsters for help against the monsters. Thelvan looked at Sorellan. The fleet commander's expression was unreadable. And if the humans refuse, he asked, then we are no worse off than we are now. And if they agree? If they come? What happens when the Kethari are defeated and humanity remains? What stops them from finishing what they started 200 years ago? The council members exchanged glances. It was Admiral Cross who answered. Nothing, Ambassador. Nothing stops them. But a slim chance of survival is better than no chance at all. We have made our decision. The message will be sent. We wanted you to know, as our representative in the Valenthor system, what is coming. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. Silence filled the command center like water filling a sinking ship. Commander, Thelvan said quietly. How much do you know about the humans? Sorellan took a long time to answer. When she did, her voice was strange, distant. I know the official history, Ambassador. The same stories everyone knows. A primitive species discovered on the edge of the galaxy. Aggressive, territorial. Several consortium members attempted to bring them into the fold. The contact war lasted less than 2 decades. The humans were quarantined for the safety of all. That is the official history. Yes. And the unofficial history? Sorellan walked to the window and stood beside him. Together, they stared out at the stars, at the distant specks of light that were the consortium fleet, at the darkness beyond, where death was coming. My grandmother served in the contact war, Sorellan said. She never spoke of it directly. She could not. The psychological conditioning prevented her. But sometimes, late at night, she would wake up screaming. She would say things in her sleep. Names of battles. Names of ships. Names of humans. What did she say about them? She said they learned too fast. She said we attacked them with our most advanced weapons. And within 3 years, they were using those same weapons against us. But improved. Better. She said we outnumbered them 100 to 1. And it did not matter, she said. Sorellan's voice faltered. She said they did not fight the way civilized species fight. They did not seek to defeat us. They sought to terrify us, to break our will. And they succeeded. Thelvan closed his eyes. And now we are asking these creatures for help. Yes, Ambassador, we are. Somewhere in the station, an alarm began to wail. Long-range sensors had detected something. The Kethari swarm fleets were accelerating again. They would arrive sooner than expected. 14 hours, an officer announced. The enemy will be in weapons range in 14 hours. Thelvan opened his eyes. 14 hours. 14 hours until the battle that would decide the fate of the consortium. 14 hours until billions of lives were extinguished like candles in a hurricane. Unless the message reached humanity in time. Unless the monsters of legend decided to answer. Unless the stories were wrong, and the humans would help them. But Thelvan knew the stories were not wrong. He had read the classified files. He had seen the footage that was never meant to be seen. He knew exactly what humanity was. The question was not whether the humans would help. The question was what would happen if they did. Hours passed. The station hummed with activity as the consortium fleet prepared for battle. Ships moved into formation. Weapons were charged. Shields were tested. Prayers were offered to a dozen different gods. And all the while, somewhere out in the darkness, a message traveled at impossible speeds toward a forbidden corner of the galaxy. Thelvan did not sleep. He could not. He stood at his window and watched the fleet arrange itself. 3,000 ships, battleships and cruisers and destroyers and carriers, the finest vessels the consortium could produce. The pride of 12 species. It would not be enough. He thought about his homeworld, about his family. His wife and children were safe on Alor Prime, far from the fighting. But for how long? If Valanthor fell, if the fleet was destroyed, nothing would stand between the Kethari and the heart of the consortium. His children would grow up in a galaxy ruled by insects, or they would not grow up at all. Ambassador, Sorelon's voice came from behind him. You should rest. The battle will come soon enough. I cannot rest, Commander. My mind will not allow it. Nor mine. She joined him at the window. I have been thinking about the message, about what we have done. And what have we done? We have invited a predator to hunt a predator. We have asked wolves to fight wolves. She paused. But I wonder, are the humans truly wolves? Or are they something else entirely? What do you mean? Wolves hunt because they are hungry. They kill because they must eat. There is no malice in it. It is simply nature. Sorelon's 4 eyes reflected the distant stars. The records from the contact war suggest the humans are different. They do not fight because they must. They fight because they choose to. They wage war not for resources or territory, but for, I do not know how to describe it. Pride, anger, spite? You make them sound irrational. Perhaps they are. Or perhaps, she turned to face him, perhaps we simply do not understand them. We have spent 200 years telling ourselves that humans are monsters, but what if we were wrong? What if they are simply different? Thelvan considered this. The consortium was built on the belief that all intelligent species followed certain patterns, that evolution, across all worlds, produced certain universal traits, cooperation, communication, the desire for peace. These were the foundations of civilized society. But humanity had never fit those patterns. From the moment of first contact, they had defied every expectation. They were aggressive where others were passive. They were individualistic where others were collective. They built weapons of unimaginable destruction, and they used them without hesitation. And yet, they had also built art, music, literature. They had created works of stunning beauty alongside their instruments of death. They loved their children and mourned their dead. They laughed and cried and dreamed. They were contradictions wrapped in flesh. It does not matter what they are, Thelvan said finally. What matters is whether they will help us, and whether we can survive their help. The hours continued to pass. The Kethari drew closer. The consortium fleet made its final preparations, and still, there was no response to the message. 8 hours before the battle, Thelvan received word that the message had been delivered. A human outpost at the edge of their quarantine zone had received and acknowledged it. Nothing more. No acceptance. No refusal. Just acknowledgement. 6 hours before the battle, the Kethari swarm fleets became visible on the main display. 15,000 ships, arranged in overlapping formations that seemed to pulse and shift like living things. They moved as one organism, a single terrible purpose driving them forward. Consume. Destroy. Consume. 4 hours before the battle, The consortium fleet began its advance. There was no point in waiting, no point in defense. They would meet the enemy head-on and fight until they could fight no more. It was not a strategy for victory. It was a strategy for dignity, for dying on their feet instead of their knees. 2 hours before the battle, Thelvan stood at his window and whispered a prayer he had not spoken since childhood. A prayer to the old gods of Aelor, the gods of mercy and protection. He did not know if they were listening. He did not know if anyone was listening. 1 hour before the battle, the consortium fleet reached optimal weapons range. Commanders gave final orders. Crews embraced each other. Some wept. Some laughed. Some simply stared into the void, making their peace with what was to come. And then, in the final minutes before death, something happened. Every sensor in the Velanthor system screamed. Thelvan was thrown against the window as the station shuddered. Alarms wailed. Officers shouted. The display screens flickered and distorted, overwhelmed by readings that made no sense. "What is happening?" Thelvan demanded. "I don't." Sorellan rushed to a console, her fingers flying across the controls. "There is a gravitational disturbance. Massive. Larger than anything I have ever seen. It is tearing a hole in space itself." "Where?" "Between our fleet and the Kethari." Thelvan turned back to the window. He saw it with his own eyes. A wound in the fabric of reality, opening like a mouth in the darkness. Ships from both fleets were thrown aside by the spatial displacement, tumbling end over end like toys caught in a storm. And from the wound, something emerged. It was a ship. Thelvan knew it was a ship because there was nothing else it could be. But it was unlike any ship he had ever seen. It was massive, 12 kilometers long, at least. Angular, brutal, black as the void around it, with harsh red lights running along its hull like veins carrying blood. It had no graceful curves, no elegant lines. It looked like it had been built by a species that hated the universe and wanted the universe to know it. The gravitational wound closed behind it. The ship hung in space, motionless, impossible, terrifying. "What is it?" Thelvan whispered. Sorellan's voice was barely audible. "It's them. It's the humans. They came." On the bridge of Orbital Station 7, the communications officer suddenly sat up straight. His face had gone pale. "We are receiving a transmission," he said. "It is directed at the Kethari fleet. Put it through." Sorellan ordered. A voice filled the command center. It was female, calm, cold, speaking in perfectly accented galactic common. "Attention Kethari fleet. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy vessel Prometheus. You have 60 seconds to withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Silence fell, and then the Kethari responded. 10,000 missiles, launched simultaneously, streaking toward the single human vessel. Thelvan watched them go. He watched the human ship sit motionless as death raced toward it. He watched and waited and wondered if the legends were wrong after all. But deep in his heart, he knew they were not. The battlefield was about to tremble. 217 years before the missiles flew toward the Prometheus. A very different scene played out in a very different part of the galaxy. The ship was called the Seeker of Dawn, and it was the pride of the Talori exploration fleet. Sleek and beautiful, with curved lines that caught the light of distant stars, it represented everything the consortium believed about itself. Elegant, advanced, superior. Commander Voreth stood on its bridge and looked out at a small blue world circling an unremarkable yellow sun. "Primitive," he said, "but promising." His science officer, a young Talori named Kessel, nodded eagerly. "The inhabitants have achieved basic industrial technology. They have nuclear fission but not fusion, combustion-based transportation, primitive computing. They are at least 300 years from faster-than-light travel. And they have resources? Abundant, Commander. The planet is rich in heavy metals and rare minerals. The population is large enough to provide a workforce, but not large enough to resist incorporation. Our assessment is favorable." Vorath smiled. This was the 47th world the Talori had brought into the consortium. The process was always the same. Arrive in overwhelming force. Demonstrate technological superiority. Offer the natives a choice between voluntary cooperation and involuntary submission. Most species chose cooperation. The few that resisted were quickly educated in the futility of their position. It was efficient. It was profitable. And it was the natural order of things. The strong ruled. The weak served. This was how the galaxy worked. Open a channel, Vorath commanded. Standard first contact protocol. Inform them of our presence and our intentions. The message was sent. And for one brief moment, everything was normal. Then the response came. It was audio only, broadcast on every frequency the human species could produce. It was loud. It was angry. And it contained a word that Vorath's translator could not quite process. What did they say? He asked. Kessel looked confused. I believe, Commander. They told us to perform a reproductive act with ourselves, and then leave. Vorath blinked. In 400 years of first contact situations, no species had ever responded with profanity. Most were terrified. Some were confused. A few were curious, but none had ever been immediately and deliberately insulting. Perhaps there was a translation error, Vorath said. There was not, Commander. I have verified the translation 3 times. The message is unambiguous. Vorath felt a flicker of something he had not experienced in a long time. It took him a moment to recognize it as irritation. Very well. Send the second message. The one with the demonstrations. The Seeker of Dawn moved closer to the blue planet. Its weapons charged. A small moon orbiting the 4th planet of the system was targeted. The weapons fired. The moon exploded. There, Vorath said with satisfaction. Now send a message explaining what will happen to their cities if they continue to resist. The message was sent. Another response came back. This time, it was video. A human appeared on the screen. He was old, with white hair and a face lined by decades of life. He wore some kind of uniform. And he was laughing. What is amusing? Vorath demanded. The human stopped laughing. He looked directly at the camera, and something in his eyes made Vorath suddenly uncomfortable. You just destroyed a moon, the human said. I assume you meant it as a threat. A demonstration of power. A warning of what you could do to us. The human leaned forward. You have made a serious mistake. You have shown us exactly what your weapons can do, and now we are going to build better ones. The transmission ended. Vorath should have listened. He should have taken his ship and left that system and never returned. He should have filed a report recommending that the blue planet be quarantined, its inhabitants left alone to develop in isolation. He did not. Instead, he called for reinforcements. 20 ships arrived within the week. They established an orbital blockade. They began landing troops. The invasion of Earth had begun. It was the greatest mistake the consortium had ever made. The first year was almost normal. The consortium forces advanced across the planet. Human military units fought back with their primitive weapons, and they died. Cities were captured. Governments surrendered. It seemed like a routine conquest, just slightly more troublesome than average. But then things began to change. The humans started learning. Captured consortium technology was analyzed, disassembled, and studied. At first, the consortium commanders found this amusing. What could primitives possibly learn from devices centuries beyond their understanding? The answer came 8 months into the occupation. A consortium outpost on the northern continent was attacked. When reinforcements arrived, they found the outpost destroyed, and the weapon that had destroyed it was one of their own plasma cannons. Modified and enhanced in ways the consortium engineers had never imagined. More incidents followed. Human resistance fighters began using consortium communication frequencies. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at will and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. They captured more technology. They learned. They adapted. They improved. By the end of the 2nd year, the consortium had lost control of 3 major continents. Human forces were now fielding weapons that matched and sometimes exceeded consortium standards. The primitive species that was supposed to be 300 years from faster-than-light travel had achieved it in 18 months. Using stolen components and designs they had somehow improved upon, and they were angry. Vorath stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the strategic display update in real time. Red dots indicated human forces. There were more of them every day. Blue dots indicated consortium positions. There were fewer of them every day. This is impossible, he said for perhaps the 100th time. They are primitives. They cannot be doing this. His science officer, Kessel, had aged considerably in the past 2 years. His fur had gone gray. His eyes had developed a nervous twitch. He had seen too many impossible things. Commander, Kessel said quietly, I believe we need to reconsider our assumptions about this species. What assumptions? All of them. Kessel pulled up a file on his console. I have been studying human history, their own records. Do you know how many wars they have fought among themselves? I do not care about thousands, Commander. Thousands of wars over thousands of years. They have fought over territory and resources and religion and ideology. They have fought because they were afraid, and because they were brave. They have fought for love and for hate and for reasons that make no sense at all. Kessel's voice was rising. They have built weapons that could destroy their own world. And they still keep building more. They split the atom, and their first thought was how to use it to kill each other. Your point? My point, Commander, is that we assumed they were like other species. Aggressive but manageable. Dangerous but controllable. We were wrong. They are something else entirely. They are a species that has evolved for war. It is in their blood, in their bones, in everything they do and think and feel. As if to emphasize his point, an alarm began to wail. The strategic display updated. A human fleet, one that had not existed 6 months ago, was approaching the consortium blockade. It consisted of 12 ships. The consortium had 40. They cannot win with those numbers, Vorath said. No, Commander. But I suspect winning is not their goal. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the consortium had lost 23 ships. The humans had lost all 12. But the blockade had been broken, and across the planet, the remaining consortium ground forces found themselves cut off and surrounded. The withdrawal began 2 weeks later. It was not called a retreat. Officially, it was a strategic repositioning. But everyone knew the truth. The consortium was running. Vorath was recalled to face a tribunal. He expected to be punished for his failure. Instead, he found himself facing a panel of senior commanders who did not want to talk about punishment. They wanted to talk about what he had learned. Tell us about the humans, High Commander Thesson said. Tell us everything. Vorath told them. He told them about the speed of human adaptation, about their ability to improve upon consortium technology, about their seemingly endless capacity for violence, about the way they fought, with a ferocity and creativity that the consortium had never encountered. They do not fight like civilized species, he said. They do not seek to defeat their enemies. They seek to break them, to terrify them, to make them so afraid that they will never threaten humanity again. And their weaknesses? Vorath laughed bitterly. We found one. They love their children. They will do anything to protect their young. We tried using this against them. It was another mistake. What happened? They became worse. When we threatened their families, they stopped following any rules at all. They did not just attack our military forces. They attacked everything. Supply lines, medical facilities, communication networks, anything and everything that would hurt us. And when we tried to surrender those forces, Vorath's voice trailed off. Commander, they did not accept our surrender. Not at first. They made us watch what they had found in our camps. The bodies, the experiments, the things some of our people had done to human prisoners. Vorath closed his eyes. We thought we were the civilized ones. We thought we were bringing order to chaos. But when they showed us what we had done, I understood why they hate us. I understood why they will never stop. The tribunal sat in silence for a long moment. Then High Commander Thesson spoke. The contact war continued for another 12 years. We brought in more ships, more soldiers, more resources. And every time we thought we had the advantage, they adapted. They overcame. They pushed us back. This was the part of the story that was not told. The part that was sealed and classified and forbidden. The part that made the consortium leaders wake in the night, sweating and shaking. The humans had not just defended their planet. They had pursued. Once they had faster than light travel. They built warships, hundreds of them, thousands. And they followed the consortium forces back into space. The first consortium world fell in year 7. A minor colony, yes, but a consortium world nonetheless. The humans did not occupy it. They did not enslave its people. They simply destroyed every military installation, every government building, every symbol of consortium authority. Then they left. The message was clear. We can reach you. Anywhere, anytime. And there is nothing you can do to stop us. By year 10, the humans had pushed into the heart of consortium territory. 4 species had sued for individual peace, abandoning their allies to face humanity alone. The remaining 8 scrambled to organize a defense, but the humans were everywhere at once. Their fleets appeared without warning. Their soldiers fought with weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Their commanders made decisions faster than consortium computers could process. And then, in year 12, something unexpected happened. A human ship appeared in orbit around the consortium capital world. A single ship, unaccompanied, its weapons powered down. It broadcast a message requesting negotiations. The consortium agreed. They had no choice. They expected to face demands for surrender, for reparations, for territory. They prepared to give up everything to save something. The human negotiator was a woman named Catherine Chen. She was small by human standards, old, gray-haired, unremarkable. She sat across from the collected leaders of 8 species and looked at them with eyes that held no anger, no triumph, no emotion at all. "You started this war," she said simply. "We are finishing it. But we have no interest in ruling you. We have no interest in your territory or your resources or your submission. We want only one thing." "What?" High Commander Thesson asked. "We want to be left alone." The consortium leaders exchanged confused glances. This was not how wars ended. Winners demanded tribute. Winners seized power. Winners did not simply ask to be ignored. "You do not want revenge?" Thesson asked. "We have had our revenge," Chen said. "Every species that attacked our world has paid a price. Every commander who ordered the deaths of our people has been dealt with. We have made our point. Now we are offering you a choice." "What choice?" "You can continue this war. You can gather your remaining forces and try again. And we will destroy you. Not defeat you. Destroy you. We will hunt down every ship, every soldier, every world that bears your flag. We will not stop until your species exist only in history books." Chen paused. "Or you can establish a quarantine zone around human space. You can pretend we do not exist. You can go back to your empires and your trade and your politics, and you can leave us in peace. And if we choose the quarantine, then we will stay in our space. We will not threaten you. We will not attack you. We will simply wait, build, grow. And as long as you respect the boundary, we will respect it too." High Commander Thesson leaned forward. "How can we trust you?" Chen smiled. It was not a warm smile. "You cannot. You can only understand that we are offering you life when we could easily choose death. Take the gift, Commander. Take it and pray that you never see us again." The quarantine treaty was signed that day. Human space was sealed. All records of the contact war were classified at the highest level. The younger species were told that humanity was a myth, a legend, a story to frighten children, and for 200 years, the galaxy forgot. But forgetting did not make humans disappear. Behind the quarantine line, they continued to build, to grow, to prepare. They watched the consortium through hidden probes. They monitored communications. They knew everything that happened in the galaxy, even if the galaxy had chosen to forget them. And now, as the Cathari swarm threatened to consume everything, the galaxy was about to remember. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and listened to the recording of the consortium's plea. She was the great-granddaughter of Marcus Vasquez, one of the first human commanders to strike back at the consortium during the contact war. She had grown up on stories of that conflict, stories of sacrifice and fury and ultimate victory. She had also grown up on stories of what came after, the peace that was not peace, the isolation that was not chosen but imposed, the galaxy that had locked humanity away like a dangerous animal and then pretended they did not exist. And now that same galaxy was begging for help. "They have some nerve," her first officer said. "After what they did to us." Vasquez nodded slowly. "They do. But that is not why we are going." "Then why?" Vasquez looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that had feared humanity so much it had built walls around them, at the vast emptiness that had been their prison for 2 centuries. "Because they asked," she said simply. "Because when they faced extinction, they remembered that we existed. They remembered what we could do. And they asked." She turned to face her crew. "They tried to conquer us once. They failed. They tried to contain us. They failed at that too. But they never asked us for help. Not until now. And that matters? It matters to me." Vasquez returned her gaze to the stars. "Set course for Velanthor. Maximum speed. It is time for the galaxy to remember what humanity really is. The Prometheus entered faster than light travel, carrying with it the hopes of a species that had been waiting for this moment for 200 years. The galaxy had locked them away, had feared them, had tried to forget them. Now the galaxy would learn that some things cannot be forgotten, and some debts must always be paid. The missiles screamed through the void, 10,000 of them, launched in a single wave from the Cathari fleet. Each one carried enough destructive power to shatter a small moon. Each one was guided by the collective intelligence of the swarm, adjusting its course 1,000 times per second, seeking the single target that hung motionless in the darkness. Ambassador Thelvan watched from Orbital Station 7, his 4 eyes unable to look away. The human vessel, this Prometheus, sat still as death approached. It made no attempt to evade. It deployed no countermeasures. It simply waited. "What are they doing?" he whispered. "Why are they not moving?" Fleet Commander Sorelan stood beside him, her own eyes fixed on the display. Perhaps their engines were damaged by the transit. Perhaps they are paralyzed by fear. Perhaps. She never finished the sentence. The missiles reached a point approximately 300 kilometers from the Prometheus, and at that point, they stopped. Every single one of them. They hung in space for a fraction of a second, as if frozen in time. Then they exploded, all 10,000, detonating simultaneously in a ring of fire that briefly outshone the local star. When the light faded, the Prometheus remained, untouched, unmoved. The command center had gone completely silent. Officers stared at their displays in disbelief. Technicians forgot their consoles. Even the alarms seemed to pause, as if the station itself needed a moment to process what it had witnessed. "What just happened?" Thelvan asked. His voice sounded strange, distant. "I do not know," Sorelan replied. "Our sensors are having difficulty analyzing the data. There appears to be some kind of field around the human vessel. A projection of some sort. It caused the missiles to detonate prematurely. All of them? At exactly the same distance? Yes. That is not possible." Sorelan turned to face him. Her expression was complex. Fear, certainly. Awe, perhaps. And something else. Something that might have been hope. "Ambassador," she said slowly, "I am beginning to suspect that the word possible does not mean the same thing to humans as it does to us." The Prometheus moved. It was not like watching a normal ship maneuver. Consortium vessels were graceful, turning in gentle arcs, accelerating smoothly. Cathari swarm ships moved in unpredictable patterns, shifting and flowing like living things. But the Prometheus moved like nothing Thelvan had ever seen. It accelerated instantly, without any apparent transition. It changed direction at angles that should have turned its crew into paste against the walls. It moved as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. And it moved straight toward the Cathari fleet. 15,000 ships faced this single intruder, the largest military force the Cathari Dominion had ever assembled. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had devoured billions of lives. They feared nothing. They should have. The Prometheus opened fire. Thelvan had seen weapons before. Consortium plasma lances that could slice through steel like paper. Cathari biomissiles that dissolved armor and flesh alike. The destructive tools of a dozen species, refined over millennia of warfare. He had never seen anything like this. The first weapon was invisible. There was no beam, no projectile, no flash of light. A Cathari battleship simply collapsed. One moment it was there. The next moment it was a twisted mass of metal, crushed inward as if grabbed by a giant fist. Then it was gone, pulled into a point so small it could not be seen. Directed singularity. One of the technicians breathed. They created a localized black hole. How is that? Another weapon fired. This one was visible. A streak of light so bright it left after images on Thelvan's retinas. It passed through 3 Cathari cruisers before anyone could react. The cruisers did not explode. They simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. "Kinetic rounds," Sorelan said. Her voice had taken on a clinical tone, as if analyzing the end of the world could somehow make it less terrifying. Accelerated to near light speed, the impact energy alone would be measured in planetary destruction units. The Prometheus continued to advance. It fired again and again, each shot claiming another enemy vessel. But the Cathari were not helpless prey. They responded with everything they had. Thousands of ships swarmed toward the human vessel. They attacked from every direction, surrounding it in a sphere of aggression. Missiles, energy beams, bioweapons, physical ramming attacks. The combined firepower of an empire poured toward a single target. The Prometheus took damage. Thelvan saw sections of its hull buckle and tear. He saw explosions blossom along its surface. He saw fires ignite and burn in the vacuum of space, but the ship did not fall. Instead, it healed. Thelvan watched in disbelief as the damaged sections began to repair themselves. Holes in the armor closed. Fires extinguished. Destroyed weapon systems came back online. It was as if the ship was alive, regenerating like a wounded animal. Nanite repair systems, Sorellan murmured. Microscopic machines, repairing damage in real time. The consortium has experimented with similar technology, but nothing this advanced, nothing this fast. The battle continued. The Prometheus waded through the Cathari fleet like a monster wading through a shallow river. It killed and killed and killed. And still they came. Still they attacked. Still they threw themselves against it with the mindless fury of insects defending their hive. And then something changed. Thelvan saw it first on the tactical display. Several Cathari vessels had stopped attacking. They were firing, yes, but not at the Prometheus. They were firing at each other. What is happening? He demanded. Why are they attacking their own ships? It is the humans, Sorellan said. They have introduced some kind of viral code into the Cathari network. Their ships are being turned against each other. More Cathari vessels joined the internal battle. The swarm, which had always moved as one, began to tear itself apart. Ships collided. Weapons fired in all directions. The coordinated assault dissolved into chaos. And through the chaos, the Prometheus moved with purpose. It was not attacking randomly. Thelvan realized this as he watched. It was systematically eliminating the largest vessels first. Carriers, command ships, anything that might carry swarm queens or hive admirals. The humans were not just fighting the Cathari. They were decapitating them, destroying their command structure, turning an organized military force into a confused mob. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was terrifying. 1 hour into the battle, the tide had turned completely. The Cathari, who had arrived with 15,000 ships, now had perhaps half that number. Many of those were damaged or compromised. The survivors were beginning to scatter, fleeing in all directions like insects running from fire. The Prometheus did not pursue them all. It focused on the remaining command ships, hunting them down one by one. And when only the Hive Admiral's flagship remained, it did something unexpected. It stopped firing. Thelvan leaned forward, trying to understand. The flagship was wounded but not dead. Its engines were still functional. It was trying to escape, limping toward the edge of the system. Why would the humans let it go? Then he saw it. The Prometheus was not letting the flagship escape. It was positioning itself, lining up a shot. A single weapon extended from the prow of the human vessel. It was different from the others, larger, more ornate, if such a word could be applied to something so deadly. Thelvan's sensors struggled to analyze it, returning readings that made no sense. What is that? He asked. I do not know, Sorellan admitted. But whatever it is, the energy readings are off our scales. The weapon fired. A beam of pure white light lanced across the void. It struck the Hive Admiral's flagship dead center. And for a moment, nothing happened. Then the flagship began to glow. Not just the impact point, but the entire ship. It grew brighter and brighter, until Thelvan had to shade his eyes. And then, in a flash of absolute brilliance, it was gone, not destroyed. Gone. As if it had never existed, the command center was silent. Thelvan realized his hearts were pounding. His hands were shaking. He had just witnessed the annihilation of the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen, accomplished by a single ship in less than an hour. He had to stop and compose himself. They did it. The humans actually did it. Around him, the station began to fill with noise again. Officers were cheering. Technicians were embracing each other. Someone was crying. After days of despair, of waiting for death, they had been granted a reprieve, but Thelvan could not celebrate. He watched the Prometheus as it hung in space, surrounded by the debris of its enemies. He thought about what he had just seen, the casual deployment of weapons that could destroy worlds, The ruthless efficiency of a military machine designed for one purpose, to kill. The Kithari were gone. But in their place stood something far more dangerous. A communication light flashed on the main console. Someone was requesting contact. Thelvan did not need to check the source. He already knew. "Put them through," he said quietly. The main display flickered. And for the first time, Thelvan saw the humans face to face. The bridge of the Prometheus was dark. Harsh red lighting cast strange shadows on the metal walls. There were no decorations, no elegance, no attempt at beauty, just functionality, just efficiency. And in the center of it all, a woman. Admiral Elena Vasquez was older than Thelvan had expected. Her hair was gray, pulled back from a face lined with decades of experience. Her uniform was black, unadorned except for a few small symbols on her collar. She looked tired, but her eyes were awake, alert. They saw everything and gave nothing away. "Ambassador Thelvan," she said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I understand you are the consortium's representative in this system." Thelvan swallowed. "I am, Admiral. On behalf of the consortium of 12, I thank you for your assistance." The Kethari are no longer your concern," Vasquez interrupted. "The survivors are fleeing. We will hunt them down. Their dominion will end." Yes, of course." Thelvan struggled to regain his footing in the conversation. He was a diplomat, trained in the art of negotiation. But this woman did not negotiate. She stated facts. "We are grateful. Truly grateful. Without your intervention, you would all be dead." "Yes." Vasquez tilted her head slightly. "I have read the reports from your High Council. You were facing extinction. You called upon a species you have not spoken to in 2 centuries. A species you quarantined and forgot. And you asked us to save you. We." "Yes. Why?" The question caught Thelvan off guard. "What do you mean? Why us? You have spent 200 years telling yourselves that humans are monsters, dangerous, unstable. You locked us away and pretended we did not exist. And now, when your empire crumbles, you come to us for salvation." Vasquez's voice did not change, but something in her eyes hardened. "I want to understand the thinking behind that decision." Thelvan felt very small. He had faced hostile negotiations before. He had stared down enemies and held his ground. But this was different. This woman was not trying to intimidate him. She was simply asking a question. And somehow, that was worse. "Because," he said slowly, "we had no choice. The Kethari were going to destroy us. Everything we had built, everything we believed in. We knew what you were. We knew what you could do. And we knew that you were the only ones who could stop them. So you only called us because you were desperate." "Yes." Vasquez nodded. It was a small movement, barely noticeable. "Thank you for your honesty, Ambassador. I appreciate that." She turned away from the screen, giving orders to her crew in a language Thelvan did not understand. The tactical display updated, showing the Prometheus moving toward what remained of the consortium fleet. Broken ships, wounded crews, the survivors of a battle they had expected to lose. "My medical teams will assist your wounded," Vasquez said, turning back to face him. "My engineers will help repair your ships. We have supplies that can be shared." Thelvan blinked. "You are helping us? That is what you asked for, is it not?" "Yes, but I expected." He stopped. What had he expected? Demands? Threats? Some kind of price for salvation? Vasquez almost smiled. "Almost. You expected us to be the monsters you remember. The angry, violent species that pushed your ancestors back to the edge of the galaxy." She shook her head slightly. "We are still capable of that, Ambassador. You saw what we can do. But that is not all we are." "Then what are you?" For a long moment, Vasquez said nothing. She looked out at the debris field, at the scattered remains of the Kethari fleet, at the 1,000 small fires still burning in the void. "We are what we have always been," she said finally. "A species that does not forget. The consortium attacked us 2 centuries ago. We remember. The consortium locked us away and pretended we did not exist. We remember. And now, the consortium has asked for our help. And you came. We came." Vasquez met his eyes again. "We remember our grievances, Ambassador. But we also remember other things. We remember that your people asked, when they could have simply died. We remember that somewhere in the consortium, there were those who argued for reaching out to us, even knowing the risk. We remember that you chose hope over pride. Thelvan felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, exactly, but something close to it. What happens now? He asked. Now, I complete the mission. The Cathari will be hunted. Their worlds will be pacified. The threat they pose will end. Vasquez paused. After that, I return to consortium space. I bring a message from the United Earth government to your High Council. What message? That the quarantine is over. That humanity is ready to rejoin the galaxy. Not as subjects of the consortium, not as enemies, but as something else. And what is that? Vasquez smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad and knowing. You will find out, Ambassador. You will all find out. The transmission ended. The screen went dark, and Thelvan stood alone in the command center, surrounded by celebration he could not share. The battle was won. The Cathari were defeated. Valanthor Prime was saved, but something new had arrived in the galaxy. Something that had been sleeping for 200 years, waiting for the moment when it would be needed again. Humanity had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy had many words for fear. The Talori called it Keshan, the cold wind that freezes the soul. The Veth, who claimed to feel nothing, had 17 different terms for degrees of concern. The Aelori named it simply as shadow touch, the darkness that falls upon the heart. In the days following the Battle of Valanthor, every species in the consortium learned a new word for fear. They learned the name Prometheus. Commander Vorelath of the Aelori Third Fleet had been stationed at the edge of the battle zone when the human ship arrived. His vessel, the Dawn of Honor, had been damaged in the initial Cathari assault and could not participate in the fighting. He had been forced to watch from a distance, recording everything his sensors could detect. Now, 3 days later, he sat in his cabin and watched those recordings for the 14th time. Computer, he said. Slow playback to 1/10 speed. The display complied. The Prometheus filled the screen, captured at the moment it first opened fire. Vorelath watched the invisible weapon deploy, watched the Cathari battleship begin to collapse. Freeze. The image stopped. Vorelath leaned forward, studying the frozen frame. He could see the Cathari ship warping, bending, folding into itself. He could see the lines of force that his computer had overlaid on the image, trying to make sense of what was happening. Resume. Quarter speed. The collapse continued. Metal twisted. The ship's running lights flickered and died. And then, in a fraction of a second, everything was pulled inward, compressed into a point too small to see. A directed singularity. A miniature black hole, created and controlled and dismissed as easily as a warrior might draw and sheath a blade. The consortium's best scientists had been trying to theorize such a weapon for centuries. They had concluded it was impossible. The humans had built it anyway. Vorelath switched to another recording. This one showed the Prometheus from a different angle. During the heaviest part of the Cathari assault, he watched as missiles struck the human ship, as sections of hull blew apart, as fires raged across its surface, and then he watched the ship heal. It was not repair in any conventional sense. There was no welding, no replacement of damaged sections, no crew in environmental suits working frantically to patch holes. The ship simply healed. Damaged armor flowed back into place like liquid metal. Destroyed weapons systems rebuilt themselves from nothing. Breaches sealed as if they had never existed. Nanite repair systems, he murmured. Microscopic machines in the billions, maybe trillions. He had read about such technology. Theoretical papers, mostly. The consortium had experimented with nanite repair, but the complexity was overwhelming. The energy requirements alone made it impractical. The coordination needed to repair a vessel in real time, while under fire, while maintaining combat operations. It was beyond any computer system the consortium had ever built, but not beyond the humans. Vorelath closed the recording and sat back in his chair. He was 240 years old, ancient even by Aelori standards. He had served in the consortium military for most of his life. He had seen battles and victories and defeats. He had believed he understood war. He had been wrong. The door to his cabin chimed. "Enter," he said. A young officer stepped inside. Lieutenant Kessera, barely 40 years old, with the eager energy of youth still bright in her eyes. She had been assigned to analyze the combat data from the battle. working alongside dozens of other officers across the fleet. "Commander," she said, "I have completed my preliminary analysis." "And?" Kessera hesitated. In her hand, she held a data tablet, but she did not look at it. She did not need to. The numbers were burned into her memory. The human vessel engaged approximately 15,000 Cathari ships over a period of 47 minutes. Of those, direct human weapons fire destroyed 4,312 vessels. The viral attack on the Cathari network caused an additional 6,178 ships to be destroyed by friendly fire or disabled beyond recovery. The remaining vessels either fled or were destroyed during the pursuit phase. Vorelath nodded slowly. 15,000 ships, destroyed by one. Yes, Commander. And the human vessel? What damage did it sustain? Kessera's hesitation grew more pronounced. Our sensors recorded significant damage during the battle. Hull breaches, weapon system failures, engine fluctuations. At several points, the vessel appeared to be on the verge of destruction, but it survived. Yes, Commander. It survived. She finally looked at her tablet, scrolling through the data. According to our readings, the vessel's combat effectiveness actually increased over the course of the battle. By the end, it was operating at higher capacity than at the beginning. Vorelath stared at her. That is not possible. I know, Commander. But the data is clear. The nanite repair systems did not simply restore the ship to its original condition. They improved upon it. Damaged sections were rebuilt with enhanced armor. Destroyed weapons were replaced with more powerful versions. The ship learned from the battle and adapted in real time. For a long moment, Vorelath said nothing. He thought about what Kessera was telling him. A ship that got stronger the more you heard it. A vessel that treated damage as an opportunity for improvement rather than a setback. How did you defeat something like that? What else did you learn? He asked. The weapon systems are beyond our understanding, Commander. We have identified at least 7 distinct types, none of which match anything in our databases. The directed singularity weapon, the near light-speed kinetic rounds, some kind of matter conversion beam that simply erases targets from existence, energy-based attacks that seem to affect the fabric of space itself. Kessera's voice had grown quiet. And those are just the ones we could partially analyze. There were at least 3 other weapons that our sensors could not process at all. Could not process? The readings are corrupted, Commander. As if the weapons operate on principles our instruments are not designed to measure. Vorelath closed his eyes. When he had been young, he had read the old stories about the contact war. He had believed them to be exaggerations, tales grown larger in the telling, as tales often did. The humans could not possibly have been as dangerous as the legends claimed. Now he understood that the legends had understated the truth. There is one more thing, Commander, Kessera said. Something we discovered in the communication logs. Go on. The human vessel remained in communication with its home base throughout the battle. Standard procedure, we assume, for reporting and coordination. We were able to intercept some of those communications. And? Kessera's face had gone pale. The humans were not just reporting, Commander. They were being observed. The battle was being watched, in real time, by thousands of human vessels stationed throughout their territory. Vorelath felt something cold settle in his chest. Thousands? At least, Commander. Our analysis suggests that the Prometheus is not unique. It may not even be the most powerful ship in the human fleet. It was simply the one that was sent. The cold feeling grew worse. The humans had sent a single ship to face 15,000. And they had more. Many more. Possibly ships that were even more powerful, even more deadly, even more impossible to stop. Why? Vorelath asked, though he was not sure if he was asking Kessera or himself. Why did they only send one? Kessera shook her head. I do not know, Commander. Perhaps they did not believe the threat was significant enough to warrant more. Perhaps they wanted to limit their exposure in case it was a trap. Or perhaps, she trailed off. Perhaps what? Perhaps they wanted us to see. Perhaps they wanted us to watch a single human vessel destroy an entire enemy fleet. Perhaps they wanted us to understand what they are capable of. Kessera met his eyes. Perhaps the Prometheus was not just a weapon, Commander. Perhaps it was a message. Vorelath thought about that for a long time after Kessera left. He thought about the consortium, which had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. He thought about the arrogance that had led his ancestors to attack the humans in the first place. He thought about the quarantine, which had been presented as a containment measure but was really just a way of forgetting a terrible mistake. And he thought about what would happen next. The humans were coming back. The message had been delivered, and it could not be undelivered. The quarantine was over. After 2 centuries of isolation, humanity was ready to rejoin the galaxy. But on what terms? The answer came 3 days later, when Admiral Vasquez transported to the consortium flagship to meet with the surviving commanders. Vorel was there, along with representatives from every species that had fought at Valenthor. They gathered in the Great Hall, a space designed to impress visitors with the grandeur and power of the consortium. Now it just felt empty. Admiral Vasquez arrived alone. No guards, no aides, just a single human woman, walking into a room filled with beings who had every reason to hate and fear her kind. She did not seem concerned. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, using the human terms for gender that did not quite translate to many of the species present. "Thank you for receiving me." High Commander Thesson of the Telori stepped forward. He was the highest-ranking officer to survive the battle, and by default, he spoke for the consortium until the High Council could be reassembled. "Admiral Vasquez," he said, "the consortium is grateful for your assistance against the Kethari. You have saved countless lives. We are in your debt." "Yes," Vasquez said simply. "You are." The bluntness of the response sent a ripple of unease through the assembled commanders. Thesson's composure wavered for a moment before he continued. "We would like to discuss the terms of our continued cooperation. You want to know what we want in return for saving you?" "Yes." Vasquez looked around the room. Her gaze moved from face to face, species to species, as if she was studying each one. When her eyes met Vorelath's, he felt a chill run down his spine. There was no hostility in that gaze. No anger, just assessment, calculation, the look of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort. "The United Earth government has authorized me to present the following terms," Vasquez said. "First, the quarantine ends immediately. Human ships will be permitted to travel freely throughout consortium space. Human citizens will be granted the same rights and protections as citizens of any member species." Thesson nodded cautiously. "That seems reasonable." "Second, all records relating to the contact war will be unsealed and made public. The younger species, who have been told for 2 centuries that humans are myths or monsters, will learn the truth. They will learn what their ancestors did to us, and what we did in response." This caused more unease. Several commanders shifted uncomfortably. The sealed records contained things that the consortium would prefer to keep hidden. Atrocities committed on both sides, weapons tested on civilian populations, the full horror of a war that neither side was proud of. "That may be difficult," Thesson said carefully. "It is not a request." Vasquez's voice did not change, but something in it hardened. "We spent 200 years watching you pretend we did not exist. We watched you tell stories about us to frighten children. We watched you build an empire on the lie that you had defeated us, contained us, made us powerless. That lie ends now." Thesson swallowed. "What else?" "Third, humanity will not join the consortium. We have no interest in your politics, your trade agreements, or your internal disputes. We will establish diplomatic relations with individual species as appropriate, but we will not bind ourselves to your collective decisions. But you will remain in contact with us? You will not retreat behind the quarantine line again?" "We will not retreat." Vasquez paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost gentle. "The consortium looked at us 200 years ago and saw primitives, savages, creatures to be conquered and exploited. You were wrong, but that was your mistake to make." She began to walk slowly through the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. "Then, you locked us away. You sealed us behind borders and convinced yourselves that you were safe, that we were a problem that had been solved. For 200 years, you forgot about us. That was also your choice." She stopped in the center of the room, surrounded by beings who could have crushed her physically in an instant but who dared not move a muscle. "Now you have called us back. You have reminded us that the galaxy exists. You have reminded us that there are threats out there that require our attention." Her eyes swept the room again. "And you have reminded us that the consortium, for all its power and history, is not invincible. That empires can fall. That even the greatest civilizations can face extinction. What is your point, Admiral? Thesson asked. Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. My point is that we will be watching. From now on, humanity will be present in the galaxy. We will observe. We will remember. And if the consortium ever again decides to attack a species simply because it is younger and weaker, if you ever again make the mistake of thinking that aggression and arrogance are substitutes for wisdom and restraint. She left the sentence unfinished. She did not need to complete it. Everyone in the room understood. We are not your enemies, Vasquez said. But we are not your friends either. We are something else. Something the galaxy has never had before. And what is that? A reminder. Vasquez turned and began walking toward the exit. A reminder that there are consequences for cruelty. A reminder that power is not the same as wisdom. A reminder that every action has a reaction, and every debt is eventually paid. She paused at the door and looked back one final time. The Kethari forgot that lesson. They believed they could consume and destroy without limit. They believed nothing could stop them. Her smile returned, cold and knowing. They were wrong. Do not make the same mistake. She left. The doors closed behind her. And in the great hall of the consortium flagship, 100 commanders stood in silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Varelath was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. The galaxy fell silent when their warship arrived, he said. And now I understand why. Thesson turned to face him. Commander? We thought the Kethari were our greatest threat. We believed they were the horror that would end us all. But they were not the horror. High Commander. They were merely the fire that attracted the wolf. And the humans are the wolf? Varelath shook his head slowly. No. The humans are not the wolf. The wolf is just an animal, doing what animals do. He looked toward the closed doors, where Vasquez had disappeared. The humans are something worse. They are the hunters who tamed the wolves, who bred them, who shaped them into instruments of purpose. And what purpose is that? We are about to find out. Varelath turned away from the doors. May the ancestors have mercy on us all, because I do not think the humans will. In the void beyond the flagship, the Prometheus hung silent and watchful. Its crew went about their duties, its weapons powered down to standby mode. Its sensors continued to scan, to record, to remember. The battle was over. The Kethari were broken. The consortium was saved. But the war, the real war, the war for the soul of the galaxy was only beginning, and humanity had just fired the first shot. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Velanthor. 6 months since the Prometheus had torn through the Kethari fleet like a blade through water. 6 months since the galaxy had remembered what humanity truly was. Ambassador Thelvan stood on the observation deck of the Consortium High Council Station and watched the stars. They looked the same as they always had, cold and distant and eternal. But everything had changed. The Kethari dominion was gone. Not defeated, gone. In the months following Velanthor, human forces had pursued the swarm across half the galaxy. Every hive world had been found. Every queen had been eliminated. Every ship that refused to surrender had been destroyed. The species that had threatened to consume all of civilized space now numbered in the thousands rather than billions. The survivors had been scattered to remote corners of the galaxy, too broken to ever threaten anyone again. Humanity had done in 6 months what the consortium could not have done in 6 centuries, and now they were here. Thelvan turned from the window as the door behind him opened. Admiral Vasquez entered, accompanied by 2 other humans he did not recognize. They were younger than her, a man and a woman, both wearing the same black uniform, with the same small symbols on their collars. They carried themselves with the easy confidence of predators who knew they had nothing to fear. Ambassador, Vasquez said, thank you for meeting with us before the formal session. Of course, Admiral. I wanted to speak with you privately before addressing the council. Vasquez nodded and gestured to her companions. This is Captain Marcus Chen and Commander Priya Sharma. They will be serving as Earth's permanent representatives to the consortium. Assuming the council accepts our proposal, Thelvan studied the 2 younger humans. Chen was tall and lean, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Sharma was shorter, with dark hair and a warm smile that did not quite reach her eyes. They looked ordinary, pleasant, even, but Thelvan had learned not to judge humans by appearance. I am sure the council will welcome Earth's representatives, he said carefully. Perhaps. Vasquez walked to the window and stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. How have things been since Valenthor, Ambassador? How has the consortium adjusted to our return? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Thelvan considered his words carefully before speaking. There has been mixed reaction, he admitted. Many species are grateful for your intervention against the Kethari. Without the Prometheus, billions would have died. That cannot be ignored or forgotten. But there is also fear. Yes, there is fear. Thelvan turned to face her. You must understand, Admiral. For 200 years, humanity was a story we told to frighten children. You were monsters in the darkness, creatures of nightmare. And then you returned, and you proved that every story was true. You destroyed the Kethari as easily as we might swat an insect. You demonstrated power beyond anything we imagined possible. And now you are afraid that we will use that power against you. The thought has occurred to many. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than Thelvan had ever heard it. Ambassador, what do you know about human history? Only what the sealed records contain. Your conflicts, your wars, your capacity for violence. Yes, we have that capacity. But the records do not tell the whole story. Vasquez turned from the window to face him directly. Do you know why humans developed such powerful weapons? Why we became so good at destruction? I assumed it was your nature. Partly. But there is another reason. Vasquez's eyes grew distant, as if she was seeing something far away. Humans are fragile, Ambassador. Our bodies are weak. We cannot survive in vacuum. We cannot regenerate lost limbs. We cannot see in the dark or hear ultrasonic frequencies. By the standards of most species, we are poorly adapted for survival. And yet you have survived. We have. But only because we learned to build. We learned to make tools that extended our abilities. We learned to create weapons that protected us from predators. We learned to shape our environment rather than being shaped by it. She paused. We became good at destruction because destruction was the only way to keep ourselves alive. Thelvan considered this. It was not the answer he had expected. You are saying that your violence comes from fear? In part. But it also comes from something else. Something that the consortium never understood about us. Vasquez stepped closer, and for a moment, Thelvan saw past the calm exterior to something deeper, something fierce and proud and ancient. We refuse to die, she said. No matter what the universe throws at us, no matter how many enemies we face, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, we refuse. We fight, we adapt, we overcome, and we never, ever give up. That sounds like stubbornness. It is stubbornness. It is also survival. And it is why we are still here, 200 years after your ancestors tried to conquer us. Vasquez smiled, and this time the smile was almost warm. The consortium looked at us and saw primitives. They attacked us, expecting us to fall. When we did not fall, they attacked harder. When that failed, they locked us away and pretended we did not exist. And now you have returned. Now we have returned. But not for revenge, Ambassador. Not for conquest. We have returned because the galaxy called for us. Because when the Kethari threatened everything, the consortium remembered that we existed and asked for help. You came because we asked. We came because you asked. Vasquez nodded. That matters to us. Perhaps more than you know. Before Thelvan could respond, a chime sounded. The High Council session was about to begin. It was time to face the assembled leaders of 12 species and determine what the future would hold. The council chamber was the most impressive room in the station. Vast and circular, with tiered seating arranged around a central platform where speakers could address the assembly. Holographic displays showed the emblems of each member species. Lights dimmed and brightened according to the topic being discussed. Everything was designed to emphasize the power and dignity of the consortium. Today, it felt small. Thelvan took his seat among the Elori delegation. Around him, representatives from every species in the consortium shifted nervously. Many of them had never seen a human in person before. Many of them had grown up on stories of monsters and demons that lurked beyond the quarantine line. Now those monsters were walking among them. Admiral Vasquez strode to the central platform with the same easy confidence she brought to everything. Behind her, Chen and Sharma took positions to either side, standing at attention. They looked like what they were. Soldiers waiting for orders. High Chancellor Morven of the Talori rose to speak. He was ancient, his voice weakened by age, but he remained the nominal leader of the consortium. It was his responsibility to welcome the humans back into civilized space. "Admiral Vasquez," he began, "on behalf of the consortium of 12, I welcome you and your colleagues to this assembly. Your intervention at Velenthor saved countless lives. Your pursuit of the Kethari has freed the galaxy from a terrible threat. We are grateful." The word seemed to catch in his throat. Gratitude did not come easily to those who had spent centuries believing themselves superior. "Thank you, High Chancellor," Vasquez replied. "The United Earth government is pleased that we could be of assistance." "Yes, well." Morven shuffled the documents in front of him. "We are here today to discuss the terms of humanity's re-entry into galactic society. You have presented your proposals. We have reviewed them. And now we must determine how to proceed." Thelvan watched the other delegations carefully. Some seemed nervous, others were hostile. A few, particularly the younger species who had not been part of the contact war, appeared merely curious. It was impossible to predict how the vote would go. "Before we begin formal discussions," Morven continued, "there is a matter that must be addressed. You have requested that all records relating to the contact war be made public. This is problematic." "Why?" Vasquez asked. "The records contain sensitive information, details that might disturb the citizens of the consortium, details that might undermine confidence in our institutions." "You mean they contain evidence of atrocities committed by your ancestors against mine?" The chamber went very quiet. Morven's face had gone pale. "Admiral, there is no need to. There is every need." Vasquez's voice had not risen, but it cut through the room like a blade. "For 200 years, you have told your people that humans were the aggressors, that we were the monsters who had to be contained for the safety of all, that the quarantine was a merciful act of protection. That is the official history is a lie." Vasquez stepped forward on the platform. "The truth is that your ancestors came to our world uninvited. They demanded our submission. When we refused, they attacked. They bombed our cities. They killed millions of our people. They conducted experiments on human prisoners that I will not describe in detail because some things are too terrible to speak aloud." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Thelvan noticed that some of the older representatives, those who had access to the sealed records, had looked away. "And when we fought back," Vasquez continued, "when we proved that we would not be conquered, you locked us away. You sealed the records. You invented a story that made you the heroes and us the villains. And you taught that story to your children and your grandchildren until you almost believed it yourselves." "Admiral, please. I am not finished." Vasquez's voice was calm, but the anger beneath it was palpable. "I did not come here to shame you, High Chancellor. The crimes of your ancestors are not yours to answer for. But I will not allow the truth to remain hidden any longer. If humanity is to rejoin the galaxy, we will do so with clean hands and clear eyes. The records will be opened, the truth will be known, and then we can begin to build something new." The chamber was silent. Morven looked like a man who had just been told his world was about to end. Which, in a way, it was. "And if we refuse?" he asked quietly. "Then we will leave. We will return to our space and close the borders once again. You will face whatever threats arise in the future without our assistance." Vasquez paused. "But I do not think that will happen." "Why not?" "Because you are wiser than your ancestors were. Because you have seen what we can do, and you have chosen to ask for partnership rather than conflict. Because somewhere in this room, in this consortium, there are beings who understand that the old way of doing things has brought the galaxy to the edge of destruction." Vasquez looked around the chamber, meeting eyes wherever she could. "The Kethari nearly won because you were divided. Because you were arrogant. Because you believed that your way was the only way, and that nothing could threaten your power. That belief almost killed you all." She turned back to Morven. "We offer you a different path. Not submission to humanity. Not membership in your consortium. Something new. Something that has never existed before." "And what is that?" "Balance." Vasquez smiled slightly. "A galaxy where strength is not the only measure of worth. Where young species are not conquered simply because they are young. Where disputes are resolved through negotiation rather than war. Where no single power can dominate all the others. You want us to police ourselves," Morven said slowly. "To behave according to principles rather than power. I want you to try. And I want you to know that if you fail, If you return to the old ways of conquest and cruelty, humanity will be watching, and humanity will not forget. The vote took 3 hours. There were debates and arguments and protests. Several delegations threatened to withdraw from the consortium entirely. Others demanded guarantees that humans would not interfere in internal affairs. A few suggested that the entire proposal was a trap, a way for humanity to establish dominance through manipulation rather than force. In the end, the vote was not even close. 11 species voted in favor of accepting humanity's terms. Only one, the Veth, who still remembered their defeat in the contact war with cold mechanical precision, voted against. The quarantine ended that day. The records were opened, and humanity took its place among the stars. Thelvan found Admiral Vasquez afterward, standing alone on the observation deck where they had spoken earlier. She was watching the stars again, her expression unreadable. "Congratulations, Admiral," he said. "You got everything you wanted." "Did I?" Vasquez did not turn around. "I wanted the truth to be known. It will be. I wanted the quarantine to end. It has. I wanted the galaxy to have a chance at something better than what came before. And has it?" Vasquez finally turned to face him. She looked tired, older than she had seemed before. The weight of history was heavy on her shoulders. "I do not know, Ambassador. I hope so. But hope is not certainty." She walked to his side and stood beside him at the window. "The galaxy is vast and old and full of dangers we have not yet imagined. The Kethari were just one threat among many. There will be others, and when they come, the question will be whether the consortium has learned anything from this experience. And humanity? Humanity will do what we have always done. We will watch, we will prepare, and if we are needed, we will come." She glanced at him with something that might have been humor. "Try not to need us too often, Ambassador. Saving the galaxy is exhausting work." Thelvan almost laughed. Almost. But the weight of the day's events was too heavy for laughter. "What happens now?" he asked instead. Now we build. We establish embassies. We open trade routes. We share knowledge and culture and ideas. We try to become neighbors rather than strangers." Vasquez paused. "And we remember." "Remember what?" "Everything. The contact war, the quarantine, the Kethari, Velanthor." Her voice grew soft. "We remember that the galaxy once looked at us and saw monsters. We remember that they locked us away and forgot about us. And we remember that when the end came, they called for us anyway. Does that anger you?" "It used to." Vasquez shook her head slowly. "Now it just makes me sad. So much suffering, so much fear, so many lives lost because your ancestors could not imagine that a strange species from the edge of the galaxy might be worth knowing rather than conquering. We were arrogant." "Yes, you were. But arrogance is not a permanent condition, Ambassador. Species can learn. Civilizations can grow. Perhaps the consortium will become something better than what it was. Perhaps the galaxy will finally find a way to live in peace. Do you believe that?" Vasquez was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but steady. "I believe in possibility. I believe that beings are capable of change. I believe that the universe, for all its darkness, contains the potential for light." She looked at him directly. "And I believe that fear is not the only thing that can bind species together. There is also hope. There is also trust. There is also the simple, stubborn refusal to give up on something better." She smiled. And for a moment, Thelvan saw past the Admiral to the person beneath. A woman who had carried the weight of her species on her shoulders. A woman who had faced down the consortium and the Kethari and emerged victorious. A woman who, despite everything, still believed that the future could be bright. "The galaxy fell silent when our warship arrived," Vasquez said. "The battlefield trembled when we opened fire. But that is not the story I want history to remember. Ambassador, what story do you want remembered? The story of what comes next. The story of how the silence was broken by something other than war. The story of how the trembling gave way to something stronger." She turned back to the stars. "The story of how the galaxy learned to stand on its own feet. Not because it was forced to, but because it finally understood that standing together is better than standing alone." Thelvan followed her gaze. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and ancient and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, new threats were gathering. New challenges were forming. New stories were waiting to be written. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. There was hope, and there was the quiet understanding that humanity, for all its power and fury, had chosen to offer the galaxy a gift rather than a conquest. The galaxy had fallen silent when humanity arrived, but silence, Thelvan realized, was just the space between words, and the next words were yet to be spoken.